All right, it's on the channel podcast with our we here to talk about the World Cup, which is ongoing, and of course, Mexico becomes the first country to book their spot into the next stage of the competition, and that is after they won by a goal to nil this morning against South Korea, courtesy Luis Romo, who scored the goal. And of course, it was a pullout from Julian Quinones, a confusion in between the back line of South Korea. And of course, their goalkeeper led to Luis Romo connecting from that instance. And of course, that ensures that Mexico have become the first country to book their spot. We all gonna remember they played the first game, the opening ceremony of the competition against the Republic of South Africa, and that was the game when Luis Quinones and we're gonna remember Raul Jimenez scoring the second goal, and that took them to 3 points. With this morning's win against South Korea, this means Mexico becomes the first country to book their spot into the next stage of competition. It was also a historical night for the Canadians, who are one of the co-hosts of the competition, and this is the third time or the third appearance in the history of the World Cup. First time in 1986, and of course they were there again in 2022. Indicatively, the Canadians have never won any game in the history of the World Cup. And in fact, all their games, none has even seen a draw. But they won against Qatar, the last World Cup host, by 6 goals to nil, which was absolutely historic. And this was how Canada kickstarted their first ever win in the history of the World Cup. Kyle Larin, who joined Southampton from Monaco, had the first goal for the Canadians. And of course, we saw Nathan Saliba scoring the second. Jonathan Davis, former striker of Lille, who's now with Juventus, came up with a hat-trick. So the Juventus striker scored a hat-trick for the Canadians. And of course, we saw an own goal that helped the Canadian team to win by 6 goals to nil. And yesterday, Mark Carney, the president of the Canadian country, was on the field alongside FIFA President Gianni Infantino, enjoying themselves. And that was how it ended when Canada won by 6 goals to nil, which was absolutely historic. So they have seen their first ever win in the history of the World Cup. But unfortunately for the Qataris, they went down by two men. So two red cards came on their part, which was quite unfortunate for the last World Cup host, Qatar. And they suffered a 6-0 humiliating defeat after impressively drawing 1-1 in their first game against Switzerland. Switzerland also won by 4 goals to 1. And we all saw that they were disappointing that first game against Qatar, but they turned things in their favor in the second game against Bosnia and Herzegovina. The first half was goalless draw, but of course, Johan Manzambi of Freiburg, who was part of the Europa League final that they played recently, scored twice. And of course, Rubin Vargas and we saw Granit Xhaka also scoring from the spot, and a penalty which ensured a 4-1 win for the Switzerland team over Edin Dzeko's Bosnia and Herzegovina. And of course, South Africa kickstarted Africa's second round of games at the 2026 World Cup. And this time around, they didn't disappoint. They end a point, and that was the 1-1 scoreline they had against Czech Republic. Sadilek scored the first goal in the early part of the game, but Capello Maseko kept on pressuring the likes of Oswin Apolis, and yesterday Aime Okon, and then we're going to remember Mbezikili Mbukazi were quite fantastic at the back line, and that Patrick Schick and the likes of the Czech Republican team were quite a pay shadow from themselves, and then the South Africans kept on piling the pressure. They had a penalty of which Teboho Mokoena scored from the spot, and of course, that one has ensured that South Africa has earned a point in the 2026 FIFA World Cup, which is ongoing. So they still have their destiny in their hands. So the South Africans can still secure qualification. That one will depend on their last game against South Korea. So if they are able to beat South Korea, that will take them to 4 points, which it could be enough. Even if they don't come second, that one might possibly help them to secure the third best place spot to see them into the next stage of the competition. Unfortunately for South Africa, they've never went beyond the group stages in the history of the World Cup. Since 1998, when they made their debut, they've never gone beyond the group stages. And in 1998, when they were in the group with the likes of France, the likes of Paraguay, they didn't go beyond the group stages. And of course, in that group again, with the likes of Spain and Paraguay in 2002 at Japan, Korea, they couldn't go beyond the group stages. And of course, the one they hosted in 2010, when they were in the group with the likes of Mexico, France, and Uruguay, the South Africans, Bafana, couldn't go beyond the group stages. So if this time around they're able to beat South Korea in their last game, Hugo Bruce will become the first coach, and this current crop of Bafana squad will become the first group to have ever taken South Africa beyond the group stages of the FIFA World Cup. Let's see how it turns out in their next games. This has been the podcast channel with our. Thank you.